April 2025. Western Montana, USA. Sounds of spring in the forest. A male Williamson sapsucker taps on a shrubby juniper trunk as the evening light fades. He flies to a wooden fence post along the gravel road that climbs west into the forest. Drums hesitantly. It's breeding season for owls. Later that same night, I'm cooking dinner over my tiny camp stove when a northern saw-whet owl begins singing. I drop dinner and grab my microphone. It's a cool night, low 40s Fahrenheit. There's a waxing 3/4 moon to the south. I listen in silence, and the tiny owl keeps singing for minutes, invisible among the dark Douglas firs. Recently returned from Oaxaca, I'm bringing all the inspiration the abueloteo has given me for local food and mixing it with my field biology work. I gather stinging nettle greens as a red-naped sapsucker drums on a cottonwood branch. In my mom's yard in Missoula, there are lots of weeds and other plants to eat. Dandelion, garlic, walking onion, masses of tender, mild bellflower greens. Young shoot tips of hops, the first time I've tried them. We dig Jerusalem artichokes with friends, and I pickle them with walking onions, ginger, jalapenos, and black pepper. I buy grass-fed beef from Oxbow Cattle Company. The Pacific wrens are singing in the forest, and I find a pair of chestnut-backed chickadees excavating a nest cavity in a dead fir. I eat tostadas that the abuela sent me, and I think of Oaxaca. Welcome to Wild with Nature. I am Shane Sater. This story, which I share here in June 2026, is called The Owl and the Leafcutter Ants. If you'd like to read it in written form, along with lots of my photos from the field, you can find it on my website, wildwithnature.com. And now, let's continue with the story. On our video calls, Carito shows me the garden in our house. The tomatoes I planted over the winter are bearing fruit, and the passion fruit is growing. On an early May field biology trip to far northwestern Montana, I built a campfire along a 2-track through a selectively logged ponderosa pine stand and cook up the oyster mushrooms that I found in the morning. A flammulated owl recently arrived from the poorly understood winter range in Mexico and Central America, sings briefly in the distance. My dinners in the field are typically rice ramen noodles that I cook over my tiny gas stove. In this season, I often add a few handfuls of stinging nettle greens. In the middle of May, I make a long road trip to the nearest Mexican consulate in Boise, Idaho, to request a Mexican visa. On the way back, I listen to great horned owls and sandhill cranes at dusk from the edge of a marsh near Cary, Idaho. As the sky gets darker and the Canada geese settle in for the night, I'm absolutely delighted to glimpse a pale white owl flying silently over the marsh. The owl plunges into the bulrushes, clearly hunting. I wait, attentive. Half a minute later, it emerges from the shadows and flies north, right past me. I get a good look at its heart-shaped facial disc in the deepening darkness. An American barn owl. I camp in a dry, rocky canyon and wake up to the gentle clucking of the chukars, a chicken-like bird of rough, arid slopes. A bullock's oriole sings at full volume from the willows. In general, though, the canyon is eerily quiet for mid-May. Without the bustle of activity from songbirds passing through in their spring migration that I was expecting to find. I gather stinging nettle from a massive, healthy patch where a seep emerges from the rocks. Later that day, I stop at an irrigation pond where a big flock of Cassin's finches, 70 of them, are feeding on the tender, leaf-like green fruits of the Siberian elms. I join the Cassin's finches and gather a bag of elm fruits, too. That evening, my ramen features not just stinging nettle, but Siberian elm as well. Oaxaca, Mexico, April 2026. A bell's vireo sings from the dense second growth of an abandoned field. Soon it will be migrating north to a breeding range that extends from northern Mexico to South Dakota and Indiana. The themes here are much the same, but so many things are different. Growing new plants is a lot of hard, sweaty work. A lot of hoping, trying, and failing. The sesame doesn't sprout. The tomatoes curl their leaves with displeasure, or maybe it's a virus. Half of the lemongrass that I transplant from a friend's garden dies. One day, I find a burro roaming around the arenilla and chase it off. That launches a major fencing project, harvesting bamboo rails and lashing them to trees along the boundaries. The abuelo shows me that the bejuco tronador vine, whose wild tangles I've spent weeks trimming, is strong and flexible when freshly cut, good for lashing. One morning, half of the beans are completely defoliated. The perimeter fencing isn't finished yet. First, I blame the burro. Then I suspect it's deer. I know that no bamboo fence will discourage those tenacious herbivores. The next morning, some of the radishes and Asian broccoli are nibbled to the ground. I cut bamboo fence rails in frustrated incompetence. The day after, I notice a few green leaves placed carefully on the ground under a defoliated bean plant, chunks cut out of them in tidy curves. Now I know what is eating the beans. It's neither a deer nor a burro. It's the dreaded arriera, the voracious but ecologically fascinating leafcutter ant. I return at night with a headlamp, observing the ants as a northern putu sings hoarsely from the bamboo along the river. I follow ant trails through viney tangles. Read about their biology. Try to learn how to tolerate them or manage them without poisoning the ecosystem. Still, in the midst of everything, most of this great diversity of plants is growing. The squash is blooming. I harvest male squash blossoms so that Carito can make squash flower quesadillas. I make eggs one morning with radish greens, Asian broccoli tops, and yard-long beans. The next day, the arriera has mowed the rest of the radishes down to the ground. The mirasol chilies are almost ripe, and the first of the blue corn I planted is waist-high. For the moment, though, most of the local food that we're eating here is from plants that we didn't tend. Coconuts from a few semi-abandoned trees along the coast. Mangoes from the neighborhood and from various friends. Oranges from the orchard the abuelo Teo planted, decades-old trees that he watered by hand for the first 2 years, carrying a bucket up the steep hill from the river. Meanwhile, every day brings more bad news from the U.S., from a democracy being ripped apart from the inside. On the computer, I work with my biologist colleague, Grant Hokett, on a niche model for our Montana tick ecology project that has been my work for the past 2 years. In 2027, if all goes well, I hope to return to Montana and continue studying ticks. In the midst of everything, I think of Montana's stinging nettles, bellflowers and oyster mushrooms, northern saw-whet owls, and Pacific wrens. And meanwhile, a northbound orchard oriole sings from a coastal wetland, while thousands of migrating francolin gulls rest, where the Rio Copalita meets the Pacific Ocean. At the Arenilla, a red-breasted chat sings by day, a northern putu at night. I plant taro, yams, chaya, and tomatoes. And every day, the corn, squash, and bananas keep growing among the defoliated beans. Thanks for listening. This story and the whole project of Wild with Nature is possible thanks to the support of listeners like you. This support includes those of you who simply share this podcast with your families, friends, and communities. My collaborators and fellow naturalists who appear in these stories, and my Patreon supporters who give me the financial backing I need in order to continue. Thanks so much. Once again, you can find these stories as written, illustrated versions in English and Spanish on my website, wildwithnature.com. There you can also find a link to make a monthly donation through Patreon, or a one-time contribution in support of my work. Those small donations are a huge help. Thank you. Until next time, get outside. And while you're out there, I invite you to continue thinking about these themes of local food and wildlife and how they relate. What thoughts do you have? Let me know. See you next month.